Go ahead. Okay, welcome back to our next session. We stopped at the point talking about Socrates, and I want to say one last thing about Socrates. I'm sorry, Plato. We talked about Plato before our break. I want to say about Plato that Plato is a good example for a number of reasons of the good part of philosophy. We talked about the forms, the concepts in the mind of God being the pattern for things on earth, which is very biblical. But for people who say, again, incorrectly, that philosophy is just intellectual only, it has no practical effect in real life, it's just a bunch of mental game playing, it doesn't really mean much in real daily life. Here's an example of how Plato can help us in daily life. And a lot of his writings, one of which in particular, The Republic, a writing called The Republic, Plato has a very down-to-earth, practical view of how government should be done. And I personally wish we would adopt some of his principles for government. For example, in America, apart from being an adult, apart from being a U.S. citizen, apart from having some money, the only thing besides that, to win the election as President of the United States of America, all you have to have are enough votes. In other words, you can be, to exaggerate, you can be almost a complete idiot, in theory, with money, U.S. citizenship, and you're an adult. But you could be almost a complete idiot and become president if you have enough votes. Because there's no standard, which I find incredible. To be a doctor, medical doctor, you have to have a standard to pass. You can't just be a doctor because you want to be a doctor. I got enough votes. I'm going to do surgery today. I got enough votes. You wouldn't do brain surgery because you had enough votes, rightly. You would do it because you have passed the standard. So why is it that you have to have a standard to be a medical doctor, or to be in my position, or in most positions, mechanic, car mechanic, whatever? You have to have a standard. You have to pass a test. You have to have a certain amount of knowledge to have a certain skill, and to be employed. Why is it that when it comes to being the leader of the world superpower, no requirements except votes? I like the guy. Plato would scream like I am if he heard that. Plato says we have to have people who are presidents or governors or leaders who are intelligent, number one, who have studied philosophy, they know how to reason, they can think logically, and they're virtuous. They're ethical, they're moral. They have studied and learned how to live a moral life. And they have been examined to be intelligent and moral, and those two categories are the test. So, wouldn't that be helpful to any country, even our own, if leaders had to have virtue, morality, and intelligence? Now, this is probably getting into dangerous territory, but many would say that Clinton was lacking in what area? Morality. Many would say that. I would say it as well. He was probably lacking in some very serious moral areas as our leader. Okay? Other presidents, I won't talk about anybody else. But there are people who say that some presidents have been lacking in intelligence, in using reason. Okay? Past or present. I'm not going to get into specifics here. Clinton's more of a safe target because what he did is, usually considered immoral in certain areas. He's more of a safe target. But Plato was saying that we need to have leaders who pass the standard, and who be intelligent, who have reason, and who have virtue. And that makes sense. That's good thinking. Okay, Aristotle. Put a box around Aristotle. Put a box around Aristotle. Now, Plato said that there were higher things in the mind of God. And there were copies of those things down here. So Plato focused on up there. Plato focused on the world of forms, the higher concepts. Now, because I gave you that chart earlier of the history of philosophy, like that, do you think Aristotle agreed? And he was a disciple of Plato. No, of course not. No self-respecting philosopher would agree with his predecessor. He has to have something new to shock the world and disagree with his predecessor. So Aristotle said, no, don't focus on the forms up in the heavenlies. Focus on the copies, or focus on the things down here. There are no essences up in space somewhere in the mind of God. The essences are inside each thing. So an acorn, for example, he would use the example of an acorn. The acorn has its essence in it, not up there somewhere invisible. So